Welcome everyone to the second lesson in the Science and Statistics series. This one's about measurement and constructs, and you can see the learning outcomes up here, which you should have on the support documentation already. I'm going to start by talking about constructs. A construct is a hypothetical approximation of reality. It's a human creation which helps us describe reality. The construct itself is entirely hypothetical, it's entirely a human creation, but it helps us describe something in the outside world with a view to then quantifying it. Think of pre-scientific constructs, cold and hot energies, spirit forces. These are ways for ancient peoples to try and understand the world, represent the world. They are rather vague though, pre-scientific constructs, but not as vague as you might imagine. For example, consider colours, relating colours to nature. I've got an image there of someone making a samurai sword, one of the great technological advances of the Asian region, far ahead of the metallurgy of Europe at the time. And yet it was very poetic in the way that the technology was represented. How hot did you have to heat the sword at the end before curing it in the water? You heated it until it turned the colour of the morning sun. Very poetic. It's an interesting pre-scientific construct. What's it doing? It's temperature. It's a thermometer. Okay, they didn't have degrees centigrade, but they had colours and they knew what the morning sun looked like. See, ancient peoples needed to measure these things. The length of a chant. You might travel to a far off Papua New Guinean tribe and they're making some kind of medicine or something like that, singing a song. Perhaps they've even come to believe that the song is imbuing it with some kind of energy. But you know what the song might be doing, the chant? Minutes, seconds. It's timing, whatever the process is. So it's hard for us to tell at a distance just how precise these traditions were, but it is fair to say that they were a little less precise than scientific constructs. I've got a pinch at the bottom then because of that wanky guy, Jamie Oliver. Imagine learning how to cook from him. I get a pinch of this and a dob of that. Jeez. Very, very unhelpful. Just tell us the measurements for God's sake. Scientific constructs, heat energy, atomic forces, degrees centigrade, time in seconds, milliseconds, is very, very precise. And not only precise, but we can communicate this kind of our understandings across the world. There's less context required. I can write up my psychology study in a journal, talk about how many milliseconds something was presented for, and someone in Germany, Leningrad, Tokyo, Beijing would be able to know what I was talking about. So much more precision there. But they're still just approximations of reality. They're still just hypothetical representations of what we think is going on in reality. Not perfect. Let me give you some example of some modern concepts which are super duper vague, and it's easy enough to draw most of these from marketing. When you see anti-aging on a product, usually a skincare product, what does it mean? What does it mean? I've asked this in lectures over many years and people say, oh, well, it removes wrinkles and it makes you look younger, and that's what they want you to think it means. Although this is an unusual one, most of the ones I'm going to talk about are rather vague, but anti-aging actually has a very specific meaning, a legal meaning. If that's on your product, it means that your product has an SPF factor, sun protection factor. Because as yet, the only way we know to stop skin aging scientifically is to stay out of the sun. I've got an anti-aging hat somewhere here, but anti-aging skin cream is sunblock. That's all it is. So something you might have assumed was vague and bullshitty. No, very specific. Weasel words. Always be on the lookout for weasel words. You see it a lot in pseudosciences, you see it a lot in politics. Vague or misleading terminology. Terminology that's inexact. Terminology that's trying to avoid precision. Scientists say that. Which scientists? Clinical studies have shown that. Which clinical studies? Don't write your research report like that. You need a citation. Too many research reports begin by saying previous research has shown, and there's no citation. It's rhetorical, weaselly word nonsense. This medicine may help. May? That's a weasel word. The world may end tomorrow. May, throw it in front of anything. Of course, I've gone to vitamin tablets as examples. The one I showed in the first lesson when I was talking about vitamin C, you might have missed it. Thought to support. Who's thinking? Who's thinking that it might support? It doesn't even say. There's another supports there on the nature's way. Helps in the maintenance of general health and well-being. God knows what that means. Maintenance of well-being. God only knows. Here's something that's not only a weaselly word, but it's actually unscientific. Whenever you see the phrase boost your immune system, something's terribly wrong. You see, no one wants to boost their immune system. Everyone wants a balanced immune system. The absurdity with vitamins and all that kind of stuff is that they're particularly useful if you have a deficit. But if you don't have a deficit and you start throwing all this stuff into your body's going to try and get rid of it. It puts your kidneys under a lot of strain. You want to know what happens to your vitamin C? Just look at your wee. 10 minutes later, your body's trying to get rid of it immediately. That's how much it doesn't need it. This poor woman I've got there in the example, she destroyed her liver by just taking everything. So boost your immune system. No. If you've ever suffered an autoimmune disorder or know someone who has, the last thing you want is a boosted immune system attacking your own cells. You want a balanced immune system. Always read the fine print. All the American examples I could find, they just say this product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease. So, that's on almost everything sold in America. This one here, though, I think this is Australian, and this is a very sensible thing. Vitamins can only be of assistance if you're not taking enough of them through your natural diet, and most of us are. So that's a very sensible, clear thing to be saying on something like this, but I doubt anyone popping these pills is actually going to go and get a proper test to see if they're deficient. Some more examples: low fat, real fruit. Real fruit. You can follow that link if you're interested, because, often when fat is removed, sugar is added in its place. It's got even more calories. Real fruit is a bit of a scam because real fruit is composed of sugar, so you can fill your product with sugar and just call it real fruit. Natural and chemical free, I want to give examples of this. Natural. Let's not forget uranium is natural. It really is. There are parts of Australia you can pick it up from the desert. Arsenic, a poison, is natural. Lead is natural. And there are even some traditional Indian medicines which use a lot of heavy metals and which are subsequently quite dangerous. Or here's an even more absurd example. A packet of chips which has it's brown sugar. And it's got natural on the front, and then on the back it says, natural is only a brand name and does not represent its true nature. Please don't get into advertising at the end of your psychology degrees. Have some integrity. Chemical free. What is chemical? Well, if you are majoring in chemistry, or if you're even vaguely familiar with chemistry, something that's chemical free doesn't exist, because chemicals are everything. Chemicals are all around us. So that in and of itself is an absurdity, like boosting your immune system. But people are naturally scared, apparently, by chemicals. Look at this product, for example. All those colours, riboflavin, yellow, brown, flavours, 3-methylabutt. Oh, God, it's so scary, isn't it? If you showed someone these ingredients and said, would you eat this product? They'd probably go, oh my God, it's full of chemicals. It's a banana. This is what the chemical composition of a banana is. And that's the absurdity of so-called chemical-free in advertising. It's got quite a specific meaning that doesn't make sense, but everything's got chemicals in it. So, yeah, it just doesn't make any sense. Anyway, that was a bit of fun. Scientific constructs have to be more precise. They have to be defined precisely so I can share my work as a scientist with people around the world. They have to have a precise meaning. The reason I'm not terribly interested in gravity and time and ecosystems, the reason why I'm giving this lesson is because you're going to face a lot of psychology constructs. And you can see almost instantly why you need to be good at understanding your constructs because, oh boy, we got some hard to define ones there. Maybe they're a bit vague. How can you measure them? Ouch. Okay, are they even useful? What's personality even mean? I mean, Nico will give you a few ideas, but we're still, this is why you need training in defining these constructs. And we define them in two ways. We define them first conceptually, and then we define them operationally. So I'll start with conceptual definitions. You're talking about what they are in relation to other concepts, what they are and what they aren't. Stress, a state of strain, whether physical or psychological. You're not stressed when you're relaxed. It's the opposite of relaxation to be stressed. It's related to anxiety. You're talking about what the concept is in relation to other concepts. You've got to avoid these two errors, or at least try to minimize them. It's not always that easy in psychology. Reification. Verb to reify. I've got a picture of a soccer ball there, rolling, and then it kind of stops. I would have preferred it to stop completely, but I can still use it as an example. The concept of rollingness. Rollingness. Okay, fine. The ball has rollingness when it's rolling. When the ball stops rolling, where does the rollingness go? Is rollingness a thing? Reification is about turning properties, turning adjectives into things, turning adjectives into nouns, turning properties into concrete things inappropriately. That's what it is to reify something. And rollingness, what happens to the rollingness when the ball stops rolling? Where did it go? Okay, it's an easy example. But what about intelligence in psychology? You can have more or less intelligence. Well, and there's even a lecture series in Psych 1002 on mental abilities, which is mainly about intelligence. But isn't intelligence just a measure of how well adapted you are to the modern world? It's kind of a property inside you, but it's not something that's necessarily bigger or smaller or so easy to quantify because the modern world is changing. I could go on because intelligence is a whole topic. Let me give you another idea if you're not quite understanding reification. Luck. You or I and most people use luck almost every day. Oh, that bird poo just missed me. That was lucky. Or, damn, I missed the train. That was unlucky. It's an adjective. It's describing a state of affairs. But for some people, they reify luck. And this is where they run into problems. This thing has luck. This poker machine, third from the left at Parramatta Leagues Club, that's got my luck in it. The parking spot where I park outside the bowling club before I spend my entire week's salary on poker machines, that's my lucky parking spot. Luck is reified as a thing that's in other things or in people. That's when it becomes maladaptive. That's when it becomes dangerous. So reification is a real problem there. The second concern when you're conceptually defining things is falsification. Your concepts should be falsifiable. You should be able to gather evidence either to support their existence or to falsify their existence, to prove that they don't exist. If someone says to you, there are fairies in my garden, then, as a scientist, you might think, okay, let's find them then, or let's find out what they really are perhaps, but let's try and detect them. So you go over to your friend's house and you set up video cameras around the garden, have them running all night long, and then come the morning, review the footage. You're looking through the footage, there are no fairies there. Says your friend, I forgot to mention to you, the fairies are invisible. That's okay, there's plenty of things in science that are hard to see. Viruses, for example, something we're struggling with right now. Infrared cameras, microscopic infrared cameras, set them up around the garden, come the morning, review the footage. Nope, no body heat. Your friend says, I forgot to tell you, the fairies in the bottom of my garden, they don't emit body heat. Okay, we'll have to think of something else then. Laser beams. And so you set up all these laser beams crisscrossing each other in the garden at 1 millimeter intervals. Come the morning, nothing. Just a few moths and a possum. Where are the fairies? Your friend says, I forgot to mention, the fairies don't have a physical presence on planet Earth. They're in the spirit realm. Now that's where you can politely pack all your equipment away and get the hell out of there, because they've just shown that their concept is unfalsifiable. There's no way they can establish it. There's no way you can falsify it. Now, if you want to be a bit rude as you leave, as you pack your equipment into the car, and they're saying, I'm sorry, they don't impact on the physical world, you can mumble, well, then they don't matter, do they? And then you can drive off. Or you could admit that and just politely drive off and get the hell out of there, because you are wasting your time. Concepts need to be falsifiable, but you might be thinking, okay, there's a lot of concepts like this, and there are. Chi from China, Ki from Japan, Prana from India, subtle energy from Europe, the Force from the mind of George Lucas. These invisible forces, they can't be established, they can't be disproven. There's no going back to lesson 1. There's no cycle of review or updating of understanding, because there's nothing being found in the first place. But, these aren't lectures about mysterious spirit forces, it's about psychology. So let's turn the spotlight on psychology. Willpower, motivation, stubbornness energy, emotional intelligence, Freudian concepts. That's a picture of that creepy guy Freud there. The id, the ego, and the superego. These are very hard to falsify concepts. You can measure them, but they're very hard to falsify. So we really don't misunderstand chi and ki and prana and all that kind of stuff. The folk and fairies, apologies if you believe in fairies, I'm sure they're real. The focus is on psychology here. If our constructs in psychology are no more able to be established than fairies, we've got a problem. The pragmatic fallacy is trying to establish something as real because it's associated with something that works. And I've got, if you're wondering why I've got a picture of a bowl with stones in it there, have a Google of the concept of soup stone, and you'll be able to find what I'm getting at there with soup stone. Hope the sound quality isn't affected. It just started raining heavily. The way the pragmatic fallacy works is that there may actually be evidence that associated therapies, that are therapies associated with these strange unfalsifiable concepts, they are actually efficacious in some way. Acupuncture, I think it's been established to work well with lower back pain, for example. But just because it works doesn't mean, oh my God, the whole book is correct. Chi meridians are unblocked. All these invisible forces are true. No. You're getting ahead of yourself. Similarly, in psychology, if we do follow Freud's guidance and start, therapy based on psychoanalytic concepts like the id, the ego, and the superego, and it works and they end up being better, then can we seriously conclude that talking about your childhood unshackles the unconsciousness and allows unfulfilled wishes to gain expression? Or are there simpler explanations? For acupuncture, maybe it's just placebo effect. Or maybe it's because, like most so-called alternate healers, they care about you, they talk to you, they treat you like a human being, other than an underpaid and overworked nurse or doctor at a hospital. Placebo effect, the beneficial effects of talking to someone who is listening, and so on. Similarly, psychotherapy. If you go through lots of psychoanalytic psychotherapy and you feel better, it might just be that you were able to talk about your problems, and talking helps. So watch out for the pragmatic fallacy. The pragmatic fallacy is what happens when you take an effect that may in fact be real, but then you use it to support concepts which are probably unfalsifiable, which aren't really appropriate scientific constructs after all. So that's conceptual definitions of variables. We've got to carefully define what we're looking at. We've got to make sure it's as scientific as possible. The next step, though, is the operational definition of variables. And this is simply, it's how they're measured and how they're manipulated. The reason why I got that a bit at simply is because it's not that simple to operationally define a variable. Ultimately, if you're interested in motivation, memory, learning, personality, arousal, or attitude, you have to design an experiment and test your hypotheses. So it's not enough to talk about these concepts and conceptually define them as what they are and what they aren't. You need to talk about how they're going to be measured. So something like motivation, for example, you might measure it in terms of how often someone presses a button. Are you motivated to cross the road in Sydney? You're going to be hammering on that button. Or it might be the rat pressing a button. Memory, number of things recalled. Learning, decrease in time to solve a puzzle. Personality, your score on a questionnaire, or perhaps ratings by your friends and family on your personality. Arousal, your heart rate, your blood pressure. Attitudes are often measured by scales as well. Now that we've kind of skipped over to operationally defining things and we're able to measure things, just be very, very cautious, because we measure lots of things in psychology, or we think we're measuring them. And just because we're measuring something doesn't actually prove that it's real. We have a lot of intelligence tests. Is intelligence as established as we think it is, for example? The second warning here is that the way you're measuring it is not the only way, and not necessarily the best way of measuring it. There may be a better way to measure the construct. I'll give you an example. Why am I relying on the Sydney Morning Herald for this brilliant research done by the University of Queensland? Because there was a mix-up with the ethics committee and they wouldn't let them publish it in a psychology journal. There's a bit of a drama there behind this, but nevertheless, this is what we got. This is what we learned about the study. Brilliant study about racism and prejudice. And you can always pause and read that if you like, but they measured prejudice in two different ways. They had people, the scenario was this, they had people with dark skin getting on buses and, oh man, I've forgotten my wallet, can you let me ride for free? And they presented that to drivers as the actual scenario of someone with dark skin getting on a bus and doing that, or they went to the rest stops where the bus drivers were taking a break and they asked them, like a questionnaire, would you actually give free rides to people with dark skin? When they asked them, 80% of drivers said, oh yeah, of course I'd give them a free ride. That's one way to operationalise prejudice. But when the people with dark skin were getting on the buses, only 50% let them on. Which is the more accurate way to operationalise the concept? The behavioural measure of the prejudice or the stated? Dr. Rebecca Pincus will talk to you a lot about prejudice in social psychology later in semester. So I'll leave that up to her. But be aware of so-called self-report operationalisations. Asking people to tell you on a questionnaire or in an interview, how racist are you? Are you an introvert? Are you addicted to your phone? No, I'm not addicted to my phone, Self-reports are notoriously unreliable. People are trying to represent themselves as best as possible, and people are often deceiving themselves, so they don't actually have insight into an accurate understanding of what's going on in their psychology. Or people are just lying. Often inserted into questionnaires, you have something called a social desirability scale. It's not as if all these questions are in one big block, the way they're presented here. They're spread across the questionnaire. So you might not notice they're there. And if you score highly on the so-called social desirability scale, your questionnaire might be thrown out. Because a high score on social desirability implies that you're really not thinking about the questions at all in terms of accurately answering them. Every time you read a question, you're just thinking, how can I please the question asker? Would you smile at people every time you meet them? No, would be the true answer. But someone who wants to impress, yes. Would you ever lie to people? Number 4. Yeah! Everybody lies to people every day. You have to. And yet, if you put no to that, then paradoxically, you're the liar. Would you ever laugh at a dirty joke people may make? Yeah. So this is a kind of a way of getting around people trying to deceive the question asker, but it doesn't necessarily make people any more in touch with who they actually are. So it still doesn't completely solve all the issues with self-report. Imagine if your self-report was questions on a questionnaire like, do you take drugs? What kind of drugs do you take? You can't do it like that directly. It's been a few years since we've had ethics for a research study like that, which went up on Sonar. It did get through, but there were strict conditions. But even if the questionnaire got through and you were allowed to ask those questions, how accurate do you think the responses would be? There's a way to get around this though. There's a direct measure. And Lucy Cormack at the Sydney Morning Herald often reports on this. And it's basically something that's, again, familiar to us now in the COVID era. You test the sewage. You go into the sewerage systems in various suburbs and cities, and you test the sewage that's in there. And you make all kinds of scary discoveries, like, in Sydney at the moment, we're heavily into cocaine apparently. Nationwide, there's a big problem with methamphetamine use, and so on. So this is a more direct measure of drug use. Here's something that's really, really old now, nearly 10 years old. But early on, when social media was a new thing and people were giving away their likes for free and letting themselves be tracked, which more and more people are realizing is not something you should do, psychology researchers, Kaczynski et al., worked out ways based on these simulated Facebook likes that many, many different aspects of a person's characteristics could be estimated. You can see genders, 93%. Can be predicted from just someone's likes and dislikes. Their religion, their drug use is there, and so on, who they're going to vote for. It's something that we understand now, that our information is being stolen and our information is being monetized, and that's why you should never like anything. It's not really, it's something of great curiosity to psychology, but it's not really psychology. If you're curious, find the Kaczynski paper and you'll see some of the interesting associations they found. For example, people with high IQs liked To Kill a Mockingbird science. That makes sense. But they also liked curly fries. And this is why I say it's of curiosity to psychologists, but it's not really psychology, because there's no theory behind this. Why do people with low IQs like Clark Griswold? That's the only one I know, actually. Harley Davidson's a kind of motorbike, I think. Why do these associations exist? Why do very, very happy people like Pride and Prejudice and Indiana Jones? That's what? That's bizarre. Obviously, happy people like Jesus Christ, because Jesus Christ is our Lord and Saviour, but swimming? Okay? There's no theory behind this. It's a great way to it's not really operationalizing it, it's a great way to kind of predict and estimate some variables, but you're not really operationalizing a construct. You can pause on that page if you want to find out more about people who are well organized or not. So that's the end of this lesson. Defining constructs, making sure that they're valid, operationally defining constructs as well. I'll give you a lot of practice on this in the upcoming workshop, because operationalizing constructs is something that every psychology student needs to learn how to do. Awesome. On with the next one.